Hello everyone and welcome to this part second of this NCERT. We have already started with our second chapter and this is 1950. We have already started and went for the 1950 to 1990 period, right? तो हमने पहले ही देख लिया था कि जो हमने पहले देखा कि इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम्स कितने टाइप के थे, कैसे हमने प्लान्ड इकोनॉमी को स्टार्ट किया था, राइट? इंडिया की प्लान इकोनॉमी प्लानिंग के बारे में हमने पढ़ा था, 5 ईयर प्लान्स के बारे में। देन वी वेंट फॉर के जो ऑब्जेक्टिव्स थे 5 ईयर प्लान्स के, राइट? कुछ ये बॉक्सेस का डाटा है, डाटा इज स्टिल रिमेनिंग, वो हम अभी कर लेंगे, ठीक है? तो और उसके बाद में हमने ये देखा कि जो वट एवर द 5 ईयर प्लान्स वर देयर, राइट? तो हम उनके जो उन 5 ईयर प्लान्स के क्या इम्पैक्ट रहे थे इंडिया पे, राइट? तो वी हैव ऑलरेडी स्टार्टेड विद आवर एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर। एग्रीकल्चर वी हैव सीन के ग्रीन रिवॉल्यूशन आया एंड लैंड रिफॉर्म्स वर द टू इम्पोर्टेंट things that were done within the agriculture sector, and because of which our agriculture sector became one of the we became one of the largest exporter of the agriculture commodities as compared to the largest importer that were before 1960s, right? तो ये दो चीजें थी जो those two things which happened in the agriculture sector, right? Now we are again going for this industry sector. तो 1950s के बाद में what were the changes in the industry and trade policies, right? So this is what we need to discuss now, and afterwards, after discussing these things, we will be discussing our we will be taking our boxes, right? The boxes which are given here, right? So some of the informations given are very important here. ठीक है, तो इंडस्ट्री एंड ट्रेड में क्या क्या चीजें रही थी? इंडस्ट्री और ट्रेड के बारे में वी नो कि व्हेन द ब्रिटिशर्स वर हियर, तो उन्होंने कुछ खास किया नहीं था, राइट? दे डिडंट डू एनीथिंग फॉर द इंडस्ट्री। फॉर ऑन द इन द नेम ऑफ इंडस्ट्री वी ऑलरेडी हैव only have the cotton mills and jute mills, right? So these two industries were only established, right, at that point of the time. But now when India became independent, now the task of the new government was to promote industrialization, right? So you can see that poor nations can only progress if industrial sector becomes good in their economy, because what actually happens is within an industry a large jobs are being produced, right? So those people who go for the employment there, they earn they earn from there, right? And then they demand in the economy. So in this way, the whole virtuous cycles goes up, right? ठीक है, तो industry provides employment and which is more stable, right? Employment given by the agriculture is seasonal as compared to it. This industry provides throughout the year employment. So this employment is stable and it is marked by the modernization, right? So modernization in the agriculture in the industry sector happens, and we are going for this jobs, right? So that is what is happening was happening at that point of the time. After independence, varieties of industries at that point of the independence, varieties of industries were very low, like cotton and jute that we have already discussed, right? So two well managed iron and steel firms were also there, Jamshedpur and other was in the Kolkata. This was in the name of industry. These two three things were only the things that were present in India, right? So now what Indian government thought that okay, the industries that will be developed should be owned by the government of India, right? Because the private sector, right, private sector was not that much capable at that point of the time, right? So what should be the role of the government? This was the question before the newly elected government. So what should be the role of the government and the private sector in the industrialization, right? So Indian industrialists at that point of the time were not very capital intensive, right? So they didn't have that much capital to to establish an industry. So what government thought that it's better that government should invest in the in the industrial sector, right? Because much of the capital is required to set up an industry, right? So now द मार्केट ऑफ इंडिया वाज आल्सो नॉट दैट मच बिग। तो जब इंडस्ट्री से कोई प्रोडक्ट बनेगा तो मार्केट शुड बी देयर, लाइक पर्सन शुड बी देयर टू बाई इट, बट ऑलरेडी पॉवर्टी वाज वेरी हाई इन इंडिया, राइट? तो जो इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट आएगा एंड ही विल सेट अप इंडस्ट्री, ही वांट्स दैट हिज प्रोडक्ट शुड sell out, right? So how will this happen if the demand is not there in the economy? So that is what was the problems in the Indian economy. So government had to play a leading role at that point of the time in order to establish the industries. ठीक है, तो कर दी, ठीक है. Now socialist lines were seen as one of the important areas कि यहाँ से हम अपनी इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर को बढ़ाएंगे. ठीक है, we will be taking our industries in a socialist line, right? Now moving to the next things, the policies of the private sector was would be complementary, right? So government will establish the industries, but private sectors will be complementing them, right? They will not be by themselves establish their own industries, but they will be complementing the government, right? Now, Industrial Policy Resolution 1956 was adopted at that point of the time, और स्टेट ने अपना कमांडिंग हाइट्स पूरा पूरा कमांड अपने हाथ में लिया था, राइट? कि इंडस्ट्री कैसे बनेगी, क्या होगा इंडस्ट्री में, जितना भी इन्वेस्टमेंट हो रहा था गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ही कर रही थी, राइट? सो ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ द सेकंड 5 ईयर प्लान में ही ये बताया गया था दैट वो टारगेट वाज फिक्स्ड कि हम इंडस्ट्री की ग्रोथ को हम पहले फोकस करेंगे, ठीक है, ठीक है. तो क्योंकि इंडस्ट्रियल ग्रोथ प्रॉपर होने से एम्प्लॉयमेंट भी बढ़ेगा इंडिया में, एंड दैट इज व्हाट द मेन लॉजिक बिहाइंड इट, राइट? सो सोशलिस्ट पैटर्न पे हमारी इंडस्ट्रीज डेवलप होंगी. दैट मींस द ओनर ऑफ द इंडस्ट्रीज शुड बी द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, राइट, एंड द पीपल. नाउ industries were classified at that point of the time. Industries were classified into three categories. कौन सी category थी? First category was industries which will be exclusively owned by the government of India, right? Second category were the industries which will be given to the private sectors, right? And the third type of industries were which were in the private sector only, right? केवल प्राइवेट सेक्टर ही इन पे वर्क करेंगे, राइट? गवर्नमेंट विल नॉट हैव एनी रोल इन दैट, राइट? सो फर्स्ट विल बी एक्सक्लूसिवली ओन्ड बाय द गवर्नमेंट, right? Second will be the government plus private, and third were only private. So this was the distinction that was made at that point of the time, right? Now moving ahead, तो सेक्टर वाज बट एक्चुअली हैपेंड व्हाट एक्चुअली हैपेंड इज कि आपने इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर को तो बढ़ाने की कोशिश करी थी, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने करी थी, राइट? लेकिन इतने लाइसेंसेस इतने रेगुलेशंस बना दिए गए थे, बट दैट द प्राइवेट सेक्टर वाज नॉट एबल टू रियलाइज इट्स ओन फुल पोटेंशियल, राइट? सो लाइसेंसेस वर वेरी हाई, राइट? सो न्यू इन दिस लाइसेंसेस सेक्टर नो न्यू इंडस्ट्री कुड बी सेटअप, राइट? सो अगर आप नई इंडस्ट्री भी सेटअप करने चाह रहे हैं तो आपको लाइसेंस चाहिए. इफ यू वांट दैट यू हैव ऑलरेडी एस्टेब्लिश इंडस्ट्री एंड यू वांट दैट टू एक्सपेंड इट, राइट? तो आपको ये एक्सपेंशन के लिए भी लाइसेंस चाहिए होता. सो द व्हाट एक्चुअली वाज हैपनिंग के प्राइवेट सेक्टर इसी चीज में ही लगा रहता था कि लाइसेंसेस लेने हैं, लॉबिंग करनी है, ठीक है? तो गवर्नमेंट के साथ लॉबी करने में इसी में लगा रहता था एज कंपेयर टू हैंडलिंग इट्स ओन ऑपरेशंस इन द इंडस्ट्री, राइट? तो ये जो पॉलिसी अपनाई गई थी गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया के द्वारा, इट वाज फॉर रीजनल बैलेंस, रीजनल इक्वलिटी. सो व्हाट एक्चुअली वाज हैपनिंग दैट इन द बैकवर्ड एरियाज, right? So in the backward areas licenses were easily available, right? Because once the industry will go in the backward areas, it will lead to the development of that area, right? So government wanted के यहाँ पे रीजनल इक्वलिटी आनी चाहिए, राइट? सो that was the thing that was happening. And also the number of quantity, right? The quantity of goods that could have been produced was also required to be determined by the government of India, right? Government was determining what was the quality of the product and quantity of the product that should be coming out of those industries, right? Okay, this was about the large industries, like large industries. And but what actually was happening that once in 1955 a commission was made, Carvey Commission. It was also called as Village and Small Scale Industries Committee. And this committee was saying that okay, we have large industries, that is very good, but the economy can grow very fast if the people right? In the rural areas are also having the industries, small level of industries, right? And those industries should complement those big industries, right? So this was in effect a model that was implemented in China during the Mao period, right? तो यही चीज को इन्होंने इस यहाँ पे भी इम्प्लीमेंट करने की कोशिश करी थी. So in order to increase the rural development, it was in 1950s, it was decided, okay, we will be starting our small scale industries in the rural areas. And the sum that was kept at that point of the time was the investment should be approximately 5 lakh crore. Okay, so maximum 5 lakh crore, if sorry, not 5 lakh crore, 5 lakh is invested, then this will be a small scale industry, right? So those small scale industries were labor intensive, they were but actually was what was happening is that they couldn't compete with the big industries, right? Because the level of development, the level of product, the quality of the product that was produced in the by the small industries, वो इतनी अच्छी नहीं थी एज कम्पेयर टू द बिग इंडस्ट्रीज. तो उनके लिए क्या किया गया, गवर्नमेंट ने एक रिजर्वेशन की पॉलिसी अपनाई, राइट? सो सम ऑफ द प्रोडक्ट्स, right, those were reserved that they will be produced by the small scale industry only. जो big industries हैं, they will not be producing that type of product. तो इस वजह से what actually was happening, this they were also given the concessions in the bank loans, lower interest rate, right? तो इस वजह से they what the government wanted कि small scale industries should come up, right? They should be employing more number of people and more number of small scale industries should come up in the long run, right? तो ये एक इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ को प्रमोट करने के लिए एक मेथड अपनाया गया था, राइट? नाउ सेकेंड, नेक्स्ट इज द ट्रेड पॉलिसी, राइट? सो हमारी जो ट्रेड पॉलिसी इज रिलेटेड टू द एक्सटर्नल ट्रेड, राइट? एक्सटर्नल ट्रेड, right? So external trade में what we were doing, we wanted that was the era of import substitution. What this means is कि whatever we are importing, we should be focusing on our own technology, development of our own technology, own products, own goods and services, so that we don't need the imports. Right, whatever the imports we are doing, we should be producing in the India itself, right? So this was the trade policy that was implemented at that point of the time. The first 7 5 year plans were characterized by the trade policy that is called import substitution, and this policy was in order to replace the imports, right? So we should be producing, we should be self dependent in order to produce those things, and we should be producing by ourselves, not importing, right? तो ये चीज कर रहे थे गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया. एंड द गवर्नमेंट प्रोटेक्टेड दिस डोमेस्टिक इंडस्ट्री फ्रॉम द फॉरेन कंपटीशन ऑल्सो. ठीक है, तो एक तो इंपोर्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन का था, दूसरा है वी हैव टू प्रोटेक्ट आवर ओन इंडस्ट्रीज, राइट? तो इसलिए इन्होंने दो फॉर्म्स लिए, दो तरह से अपनी इंडस्ट्रीज को प्रोटेक्ट करने की कोशिश की. वन बाई द टैरिफ्स एंड वन बाई इम्पोजिंग टैरिफ, एंड सेकंड बाई इम्पोजिंग द कोटास. तो टैरिफ्स क्या होते हैं? टैरिफ्स होते हैं टैक्स कलेक्ट किए जाते हैं वट एवर द इम्पोर्ट्स वी आर डूइंग, उनके ऊपर, इंपोर्टेड गुड्स के ऊपर टैक्सेस लगा देते हैं, राइट? सो दैट इफ द टैक्सेस विल बी हायर, तो इंपोर्ट नहीं होंगे, कम होंगे, राइट? प्रोडक्ट्स कम होंगे और क्वांटिटी कम क्वांटिटी में इंपोर्ट्स होंगे, राइट? एंड सेकंड वाज द कोटास. कोटास मींस the quantity was fixed, that how much quantity can be imported. Suppose wheat was to be imported, then government would fix that, okay, 1000 tons of wheat can be imported, not more than that. So this was the quota that was put, right? तो ये किया गया था उस समय in order to make our own industry come up, right? So this was done, and it was done because it was assumed that domestic industries, if it will be protected from outside world, then they can come up with the new technologies, new development as they will be growing, and they can compete with those large big industries in the due course, right? So this was done. So in effect, if we are able to see our own exports from here, we were doing low imports and we were also doing low exports, right? So we were largely disconnected from the world outside, right? So, what was the effect of those policies on the industrial development? We implemented these policies. I have already explained you. And what was the impact of these industry in these policies on the industrial development? Proportion of the GDP by the industrial sector that was contributed by the industrial sector increased from 13% in 1950 to 25% approximately by 1990s. That means a growth of approximately 15 12% राइट अप्रोक्सीमेटली 12% की ग्रोथ इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर में देखी गई थी राइट सो डेट मीन्स द ग्रोथ वाज कमिंग अप राइट दोज पॉलिसीज वर वर्किंग राइट इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर वाज डाइवर्सिफाइड बाय 1950 ठीक है एंड वी वर प्रोड्यूसिंग मच ऑफ द थिंग्स एज कंपेयर टू द टाइम दैट वी गेट गॉट इंडिपेंडेंस एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ द टाइम राइट सो स्मॉल स्केल इंडस्ट्रीज वर giving opportunity to the people who do not have capital so they could start with the small businesses right and protection from the foreign competition was also available with the small scale industries and as well as the domestic industries right so indigenous industries were coming up in the electronics automobile sector right so these industries came up in India right at that point of the time so in automobiles, Maruti and Suzuki, etc., that you already know that came after the independence, right? So and this electronics, as you also see that this policy that government implemented at that point of the time is also available for the electronic sector at this point of the time also. Government is promoting the electronic sector. So in that perspective, you will be seeing that whatever the government is taking, policies that the government is taking, those are in order to protect our own industries, right? ठीक है but what actually was happening there was another side of the coin also the performance of the many because industry in the industrial sector the government wanted that this government owned public sector enterprises should be there but those PSUs were not performing at their much at their own potential right so state was producing goods in large quantities right but also not only the goods but those goods were also being produced by those PSUs which could have been produced by the प्राइवेट सेक्टर राइट सो वहां वहां पे मोनोपोली लेके बैठी हुई थी गवर्नमेंट और गवर्नमेंट के पीएसयूज जहां पे जरूरत नहीं थी राइट सो इफ यू कैन सी द एग्जांपल टेलीकम्युनिकेशन सेक्टर तो उस समय केवल बीएसएनएल ही था right so bsnl after bsnl no other telecom was allowed to be established in India right even you can say the bread was also being made by the government of India right government of India PSU of government India तो ब्रेड में ऐसी कौन सी चीज है जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर नहीं बना सकता राइट तो धीरे ये जो पॉलिसी गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने इम्प्लीमेंट करने की कोशिश की थी लेकिन इसकी वजह से जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर का जो ग्रोथ था वो नहीं हो पा रहा था right so and even the private sector was not allowed to manage hotels as well तो गवर्नमेंट अभी भी गवर्नमेंट भी रन कर रही है होटल्स को so this was not the case this should not be the case because गवर्नमेंट को हर एक चीज नहीं करनी है अब इकोनॉमी हैज come up economy has strengthened इंडियन इकोनॉमी हैज स्ट्रेंथेंड टू अ वेरी हाई क्वालिटी तो 1990s में भी ये गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया कर रही थी राइट फर्स्ट वाज द थिंग देन सेकंड वाज द थिंग दैट गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया की बहुत सारी जो पीएसयूज थी वो लॉसेस में चल रही थी बट स्टिल द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया वाज रनिंग देम right so those losses that were being done by the PSUs those losses can be could have been the money that money can be used in the other welfare schemes etc लेकिन गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया उनको लॉसेस में भी रन कर रही थी राइट सो दैट वाज ड्रेनिंग द लिमिटेड रिसोर्सेस ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया right and the third important challenge or issue that was happening was the licenses system right तो इंडस्ट्री को जो लाइसेंस मिलना था that was being misutilized by the big industrial players they were not wanting they didn't want के any other industrialist should come in their sector right if suppose steel is being made by the government right any big industry is there big industrialist is there any other industry wants to be set up here for the steel and this wants a license but this first person will say to the government that don't allow it right because there is also corruption right so because of that जो सेकंड इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट है, he was not able to put his plant, right? So this was preventing the competition to be created in Indian economy, right? तो licenses की वजह से another issue was coming up, and this was called as license raj at that point of the time, right? This prevented the competition to come in India, right? The fourth important issue was the protection that was given to the domestic players, right? So it was also criticized because आप कब तक प्रोटेक्शन करेंगे, कब तक उसको प्रोटेक्ट करेंगे, राइट? इफ यू आर प्रोटेक्टिंग देन देयर विल बी लेक्सिटी, right? There will be laxity by the person, by the industry, right? जो domestic industry, they will be laxed, right? They will not be going for the new technologies, they will not be adopting new technologies. So there was no incentive to move to the next industry, right? To improve their quality of the product, right? To have better technology um, in their quality, right, in their industry. So this was these were all the problems at that point of the time, and hence we went for new economic policy in 1991 that we will be discussing in the next chapter. But we are here only concerned about 1950s to 1990 90s or 91, before 1991, right? So these were the problems of the industrial sector at that point of the time. So what was the conclusion? Conclusion is that progress of Indian economy was seen in the 5-year plans, right? Industry sector became diversified, right? And we went for self sufficiency in the food sector, right? Because of the reforms like land reform and also the green revolution, etc., right? But if we see the policies for the industries, they were inward oriented, and they failed to develop a strong sector. So we were averse up to the imports as well as exports. So we were a type of closed economy at that point of the time, right? So this was all about the chapter, but let us do the boxes and important things which can open the minds of the viewers, right? तो सबसे पहला box was already run, 1 and 2 boxes were already run. uh, we will be going for this box. This box is about Mr. Mahalanobis, and he was a statistician by his profession. But what actually was happening is that government of India invited this person, Mr. Mahalanobis, in order to prepare the second 5-year plan, right? So some of the people were renowned at that point of the time, and he was the one of the important person of that period. So what he did, he was the architect of Indian planning, and he was the person who said, okay, we should go for the industrial development. We should focus on developing our own industry, right? So this person, Mr. Mahalanobis, also developed Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata, and also started a general Sankhya, right? So you should be aware about this person also. Next important box is about the service sector. So there is a structural change. Every country, when it develops, it undergoes a change, right? A structural change. The proportion of agriculture in GDP will keep on decreasing, and then industry will keep on increasing, right? And as the time will be progressing, more the contribution of the agriculture will decrease, or industry will increase, and then service will increase, right? So this is how every structural change happens in every country. But what actually has happened, the India's change was very peculiar, because agriculture declined in India, that we have already seen, but it declined very slowly, but yes, it declined. And by 1950s the share of services sector grew very fast. इंडस्ट्री का सेक्टर केवल इंडस्ट्रियल कंट्रीब्यूशन वाज अप्रोक्सीमेटली 22 23 एंड 23% अप्रोक्सीमेटली लाइक दिस. बट हमारा जो सर्विस सेक्टर है वो बहुत तेजी से ग्रो कर गया. हमारी जो ग्रोथ है, दैट वी ट्रांसफॉर्म फ्रॉम एवरी इकोनॉमी ट्रांसफॉर्म्स फ्रॉम एग्रीकल्चर टू इंडस्ट्री एंड देन टू सर्विस, बट वी वेंट डायरेक्टली फ्रॉम एग्रीकल्चर टू सर्विस. We skipped the industrial phase, and that is the what is the problem that India is facing at this point of the time, right? Because we are not seeing the growth in the jobs in India, right? So this was all about this box. Next important is the policy of the land to the tiller, and this box is important in the sense of land reforms that was done, right? और ये land reforms का जो हमने पढ़ा है, that we have already seen in our part 1, right? So why this land parcels were given to the tiller? The idea was that cultivator takes more interest in increasing the production and as well as the produce of the farms, right? Because jamidar doesn't have any incentive to increase the production, right? But when the farmers will be given their own ownership of the land, then they will be incentivized to increase the production. And this idea came from the Soviet Union. What was happening that in the Soviet Union, as we have already discussed in the chapter in the part 1, that in the Soviet Union all the land was taken by the government of India, right? And farmers were reduced to the laborer class. So farmers were packaging the rotten fruits in along with the fresh fruits in the same box, right? Whatever the fruits that they were cultivating, right? So because they were not being given the whatever the benefits will be coming out of that, so they were not interested in doing the extra efforts, right? So that is why what actually was happening, the quality of those exports were decreasing in Soviet Union. So that is why the government of India thought that we should be giving those land parcels to the tillers, right? We should be passing the ownership to the tillers, right? So with those ownership, in the absence of ownership, no incentive is part of the farmers to be efficient, right? So if the ownership is not transferred, the owners will those landowners will not be going for increasing the productivity of their land, right? So that is why this was the idea behind the land reforms that we have implemented, and we gave the ownership rights to the tillers, right? Okay, now moving to the next important box, prices remains as a signal, right? So what this box talks about is that prices remains as a signal for the availability of the goods, right? If the availability of the goods is lower, right? Suppose flood comes in an area, right, where tomatoes are being produced, right? If the tomatoes got rotten away, right? So much lesser quantity of the tomato will be safe, right? So because of the availability of the tomatoes in less quantity, so the prices will increase, and the prices reflect the scarcity, right? So people will be more incentivized to make efficient decision about the use of that with the price, because of the rise of the price, right? So this is what the analogy that is being explored here, that what actually is happening, that in some of the states of India, free electricity and water are being provided for the farmers, right? So and because of the subsidies, maybe free they may be free or they may be subsidized, right? So what actually is happening is that farmers are not utilizing those resources efficiently, right? So they are wasting it, right? So if the water is priced at its with reflect to the scarcity, right? So the what will happen is that farmers will utilize it judiciously and efficiently. So that is what is being talked about in this sector, right? So the same goes with the fertilizer and pesticides also, right? So in effect, this box is saying that those water, fertilizers and pesticides, etc., should not be subsidized to that level that it becomes the exploitation of those resources keeps on going at that point of the time, right? Now, moving to the next thing, this box is very important. This shows the structural occupational structure of India's economy from 1950s, change from 1950s to 1990s. And in 1950s, 72% of the people were engaged in agriculture, and 1990s it reduced to 66%. Industries was employing 10%, and it has increased to 12%, and in service sector 17 to 20%. So actually, what was happening, that people from agriculture sector were diversifying into the industry as well as services sector, right? So this box is important, you should remember it, right? Note it down in your notebook, right? Now that box was about the number of people, right? Now contribution to the GDP, right? In the GDP, what was the contribution in the agriculture from 1950s to 1990s, right? So agriculture, the contribution was 60%, approximately 60% in 1950s, and that dropped to 74%, 75%, oh, sorry, 35%, right, in 1990. In the industrial sector, 13% was the sector, and then it went up to 25% approximately, right? In services sector, from 28% to 40%. So services sector grew very fast, right? And agriculture sector drastically reduced uh, its contribution to the GDP, right? तो ये बॉक्स भी important है. Sometimes you can also quote this type of information in your mains exam, right? तो ये आपको अच्छी तरह से नोट्स बना के रख लेना है, right? Okay, this was all about the boxes and all those important things that was available, right? So thank you all, and then we will be discussing again in the next chapter what were the changes in Indian economy after 1991 and how the economy progressed after this, right? So okay, thank you all. We will be seeing these things in the next chapter. Till then, thank you. Okay. And this PDF you can always find in the app, right? The link will be given to you, right? Okay. Okay. Thank you all.